Good evening and welcome to UK Crime Book Club. And tonight I'm delighted to be joined by Jo Furniss. And Jo is here to talk about, amongst others, about her latest book, Guilt Trip, which came out yesterday.
Yeah, it's out yesterday. It's in the world.
It is in the world. And we were chatting about it a little bit before we came on, but we'll chat some more. But to start with, would you like to introduce yourself and your book, Jo?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jo Furniss. My latest is Guilt Trip, as you say. Last year, I also had another crime novel called Dead Mile, which I think a few people on here may have read because I did a similar kind of live this time last year as well with you guys. And yeah, so I write crime novels and previously written some psychological thrillers. And before that, sort of what feels like a previous life, I was a journalist
Oh, wow.
for a long time.
Yeah, so you've really you have stayed basically in the crime sort of genre. I don't know what you did as a journalist, but I guess you could say that was as well.
Yeah, I did a little bit of, I mean, I wasn't like a crime reporter or anything. I was like a general news reporter. I used to work for the BBC. So I was like a general newsroom sort of, jack of all trades kind of reporter. But I did sometimes, I spent a lot of time at sort of, various sort of crime scenes or accidents and things like that. I went to court sort of quite a few times. We would go, we'd normally go to like the first day and the last day of a trial, because in BBC World, that's all that they can kind of afford for you to go and do. They can't afford a reporter to sit there all the way through a trial. So you tended
weeks,
to kind of,
couldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just take up so much of your time. So you'd maybe go the first day and then the for sentencing or something like that. Go to the odd inquest and things like that. So I was kind of around the sort of the edge of the crime world, I suppose. Spent a lot of time sort of standing in the cold, sort of, banging my feet together, trying to stay warm alongside like a load of coppers who were doing the same thing. But yeah, that was kind of as close as I got to the crime world until I turned to crime, as they say.
Yeah. Did that inspire you at all with your writing? Do you think that sort of being around those sort of things, or was there other things that has inspired you to write crime?
I think it definitely inspires me, and I very much find myself inspired by events that are happening in the news. I think a lot of stuff, from the news kind of pops into the books, and sort of, as you're planning a book and as you start writing it, they sort of start to thread in. And sometimes it's weird, like you start writing on a theme and then maybe it's just mentionitis because I'm writing about it, I notice it, but it suddenly feels like it's all in the press a lot. I mean, like with Guilt Trip, it's set in a school, quite a sort of elite, very academic school. And then as soon as I started writing it, we've been having all this kind of debate about private schools and all of this kind of thing. So it suddenly felt like it was all sort of swirling around kind of in the zeitgeist sort of thing. But I definitely find that stuff from that previous life, right, when I worked for the BBC, it was very much kind of my formative years. Like that was like all of my 20s into my 30s was when I was a BBC reporter, and I think some of those experiences were really formative. And even like Dead Mile, the book that came out last year, which is it's a murder mystery that all takes place in a traffic jam on the motorway. And a lot of that actually was inspired by a couple of times, I think, when I was a journalist, and I was stuck myself, sort of like covering something on the motorway. I remember spending hours on the M42 once because they were putting a new bridge in place, and they shut all the motorway, and then we were all the journalists were kind of just standing there like in the fast lane. And I remember just feeling how weird it was to be standing somewhere that you just felt instinctively like it's not safe to stand
here. You shouldn't be stood there. Your whole body's going,
get off the motorway. It was because all the traffic had stopped. But I've never sort of forgotten just that weird itchy feeling of something in your brain kind of going, get away from here. It's not, this isn't a safe place to be standing. So yeah, those things do kind of stay with you, I suppose.
And what sort of when you started to write the Guilt Trip, what sort of comes first for you? Is it the idea? Is it the setting? Is it the characters, or is it sort of a combination?
That one was very much a premise. And to be honest, like I was actually, so the idea for this came because I was pitching Deb Mile. Actually, I'd written Deb Mile, and I moved agents and I moved publishers. There was a lot of sort of movement between my previous novels and Deb Mile, and I was about to sort of send out all the letters of submission to like agents and things, and I knew that I needed to write. You know, you always need to suggest that you're writing like another thing, that you've got another book in the pipeline. So I thought, oh, I need another idea for like the next thing, and I want it to be. I realized that Deb Mile was very much like a sort of like a locked room almost, or like a closed circle mystery, like a bit of like a modern take on an Agatha Christie. So I thought, okay, I need something else that's kind of similar. So I was trying to think of another kind of closed environment. And I'd literally one morning, I'd dropped my kids off to school and I was driving home and thinking, right, you know, I'm sort of running through my to-do list in my head, thinking, as soon as I get home, I'm going to send off those submissions letters. I need to just write a last bit on it. I need an idea. I need to like just, even if it's just one sentence idea for like the next book. And as I was driving back, I just kept seeing all these school minibuses with all like the livery of all like the school names all emblazoned down the side. And I thought, okay, well, what if one of those sort of disappeared because, you know, someone had kind of thought like there's a whole load of, you know, children of influential people, so we'll grab them. And that was it really. And I went home like literally that morning and just sort of turned that into a one-liner and popped it on the end of this letter. And then that just kind of like weirdly kind of carried on down the pipeline. So like when, you know, my new agent saw it, she was like, oh, I quite like this idea. And then the publisher saw it and they were like, oh, we like this idea. And then I had like a deal in Germany, and Germany were like, oh yeah, we'll buy that book as well. So suddenly I was kind of committed. I just had this like, you know,
just that like brief moment. But I guess that's sometimes how the best things come, because you haven't overthought it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was kind of organic. I guess it was sort of organic in a focused kind of way. Like I say, I was looking for a sort of another closed environment and quite a sort of mundane environment. So I was thinking, you know, Deb Mile is on the motorway. Guilt Trip is in a school. Like it's just a sort of a relatable place where anyone can find themselves, you know. And also you get hopefully like a sort of a mixture of people. You meet all kinds of people on the motorway and you meet all kinds of people at school. The only thing you have in common really is that you happen to have had a kid in the same year, right? And that sort of throws people together, and hopefully that makes an interesting sort of scenario.
Yeah, definitely. And I think sort of because the book is sort of split, isn't it, into a couple of stories, and it's one story, but there's sort of two voices as such in the book. And I was quite interested sort of how that came about, and maybe we can come back to that. But sort of the characters, so you've got Emily. Did you want to say a little bit about the characters, introduce them a little bit? Yeah,
sure. So we start off with Emily, who's the mum, and she finds herself, it's like 3:00 on a Monday afternoon, and she gets the call saying, can you come into school? And she's kind of huffing and puffing because she's a bit like, do these people not understand that we have jobs? You know, why am I being called into school? And she goes in, and she's sort of pushed into the sort of the school hall along with like a few other parents. And that's when she starts to get worried, because she's thinking, okay, well, there's actually quite a small number of parents. There's only like 5 or 6 of us. And so that's too many for it to be anything like my daughter has, you know, been told off for something, but it's not enough for it to be like a general thing. So she starts getting like, you know, the hairs are sort of prickling a little bit on the back of her neck, and she realizes that something has gone wrong. And that first chapter ends with her being told that, you know, the kids have disappeared. They just don't know where this bus has gone. They were all on a minibus. It set off back to school from a swimming competition, which is only like half an hour away. And it just never got back to school. And the bus driver's not answering his phone. The kids, none of them are allowed their phones. So they, you know, they're out of contact. And the parents are sort of essentially, they immediately start kind of looking at each other, kind of going, well, who here is responsible? You know, something has obviously happened to our children. Who here is potentially responsible? Like, has someone done something that's brought this down on our heads? So that's the immediate kind of, you know, conflict that kind of happens between everyone.
And Emily, her daughter Olivia, is she's at the school, but she's got a scholarship, hasn't she? So so she's, you know, she's got her own sort of backstory. Olivia has, sorry, Emily does.
Yeah.
But the other parents, you know, you've got MPs and, you know, people, really high profile people who they all go into a bit, you know, I'm quite interested in how they were to write, because some of them like were pretty awful. So
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was sort of, you know, you're trying to kind of ratchet up the tension, really. So
yeah,
everybody absolutely has got their kind. Everyone's got like a little question mark over their head, like a reason why they might have been targeted. So I was kind of looking to give these people sort of, you know, fairly colourful lives. They're all quite sort of high powered people in different ways. I didn't want to fall into the trap of them all just being like stinkingly rich in the sense of that kind of inherited money. Like they're all, you know, one is a very sort of high flying surgeon, well, an anaesthetist actually, but like a very high flying doctor. One, like you say, is an MP. One sort of made some money in the city, but then there's been a bit of a question mark about why he left the city. One is it's got a construction firm that's done very well, you know, but they are kind of like powerful people who have been suddenly disempowered, and they don't like that, and that kind of makes them dangerous. And so I very quickly wanted to get into this idea that they're not, these parents, for about the first 5 minutes there's a sense of like, oh, we're all in this together, but that fades really quickly, because they suddenly sort of, like I say, they're sort of blaming each other. They're sort of looking at each other. They're also very slightly sort of worried that one of the others is going to get some kind of an advantage and, you know, sort of maybe get their kid at the expense of all the others. So there's a sort of a competitive element. And I think anyone who's been around any school, I mean, I don't think it has to be a particularly elite school for this to be true. Like parents are competitive, you know, everyone thinks that their kid is like the special little one that deserves, you know, better treatment. So I felt, I sort of, like I say, it was about making it relatable. And I sort of hoped that readers would kind of go, oh yeah, I feel like I've met some of these people, even if it is an MP. Do you know what I mean? Like you're kind of like, oh yeah, I feel like I've met some of these people.
Yeah, because I think, you know, you obviously made them more high profile because of it being a sort of an elite school. But as you say, is that we've all sort of met people who are like that, but in a, you know, may not be, you know, it could just be in a little village school, but there's still those characters, isn't there, who are like, you know, the ones that take control over everything and the ones that sort of stand back. And so
Emily, sorry, Karen, you go on. I think we glitched a tiny bit.
No, sorry, you carry on. No, that's fine. Sorry. You
that's right. And I was just going to say, and Emily, I think she's a bit of an outsider. I love writing characters who are kind of outsiders. I think literally across all of my books, they're always kind of outsiders. And I think because her daughter is the one who's in this school kind of on a scholarship and a bursary, this is not sort of an environment that Emily is very familiar with herself. You know, it's not the sort of school that she kind of went to. And so that she feels, rightly or wrongly, that puts her at a disadvantage as well, that she's kind of on the back foot a little bit. So that kind of adds to her discomfort a little bit and sort of justifies her when she starts, well, frankly, snooping around.
And she's, I mean, I think that's sort of the fact that they don't all get on, you know, they're not big friends, are they? I think that sort of adds to the suspense because they don't really know how each other is going to react as well. And I think that makes it more interesting, doesn't it? If you don't know what the other people are going to do and they're quite unpredictable.
Yeah, and I think even when you know people a little bit, again, it's a funny thing around school, isn't it? Like you sort of know people a bit, but not actually that deeply. And it's strange because you think sometimes, like at the school gate, you know, you see someone every morning or every evening, and so you feel like you know them, but actually you don't. You know, how well do you really know these people? And I think when people are kind of put under any kind of pressure in some sort of crisis, then quite often they change, or you see like other sides of them. You know, generally speaking, nobody's great under pressure, right?
No.
A lot of people.
And something as stressful as your children going missing and not having any answers. And I thought that taking the phones away was really clever, because that obviously adds that bit more of peril to it, because we all know that 17-year-olds are generally glued to their hand, so
on the phone. Yeah,
exactly. So I guess that was an essential thing, that you had to find a way of taking them away, so that it became more sort of claustrophobic and isolated.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the I'm sure you probably hear this a lot with your authors who are on. I think pretty much anyone who's writing like a contemporary novel has this problem of mobile phones, because it kind of ruins every story. If you can sort of solve it too quickly, or just track your phones. And most parents are kind of tracking their kids, whether the kids know it or not. We're tracking them. So I had to kind of get rid of those like very quickly, but that's quite easy. In fairness, that was kind of quite easy to do, because a lot of schools have a no phones policy nowadays. So I just made it one of those schools.
More are going. I think my kids' schools, they blocked the internet when they were at school, so they could have their phone with them, but it just didn't work.
Yeah, exactly. And even in this one, like they lock them away. Like you see that sort of at the beginning when as they're going away, they lock them all in this little kind of box, and you see that's kind of what happened. But yeah, I mean, my kids both go to a no phone school, so it didn't feel like that was sort of convoluted.
No, not at all.
But it is a problem. It is an absolute problem that every crime writer on here, like I say, probably says, is you have to jump through this hoop of like, how on earth am I going to get all the phones off them? Because
some will just say, well, that's why I write in the 1940s. So that's why some people do. And I just say I can't go to contemporary because I don't want to go to. And actually, I remember seeing Jacqueline Wilson when she was writing. She did write sort of contemporary with Tracy Beaker, and then she said, and then as phones came in and things, she moved away and went to the sort of the historical, like Hetty Feather, because she couldn't. She said she just didn't know enough about how kids interacted with them, and she just said that was why she moved to sort of historical fiction rather than carrying on trying to do something that she didn't know about, because she said she'd always been quite true to herself. And so so it's really interesting.
And it's a double-edged sword. I mean, they can do a lot for you, as well as when you're plotting. Obviously the phone allows you to kind of find out so many things. It's actually, it's a wonderful resource if you're actually looking for ways like, how on earth is my character, I need them to, when you're sitting there like plotting it all out on a big piece of paper, I need my character to find this clue. How on earth do they find that out? And it's brilliant if they can just Google it. So sometimes you're kind of almost like, I want to take the phone off them, and then I want to give it back to them for 5 minutes, and I want to take it away.
We can find one, and we can just have it for like that, say that little split second.
Exactly. You want to have your cake and eat it.
How was it writing the two stories? Did you write them together, or did you write them separately? Did you write it as one whole piece and then sort of, not the two stories, but the two voices? Sorry.
So I should explain. So Emily's the parent, and so the story starts with her, like literally chapter 1 is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Emily gets called into school. Then chapter 2, we pop back to like 7:30 or whatever it is that morning. And her daughter, Olivia, who is leaving home on her way to school. And then you alternate chapters between afternoon and morning. And obviously the two times sort of they slowly catch up with each other. The daughter's chapters go a little bit faster in time than Emily's, so that you get to a point about sort of 20% or whatever it is off the end. And they're actually in the same time zone now, just in slightly different places. So it's kind of like a dual timeline novel, but instead of sort of having like one happening in 2025 and one happening in 1940 or something, we've got sort of one happening at 3 o'clock and one happening at the same morning at like 7-8 o'clock.
There's just like a slight lag of catching up, but it's an important part of the book, isn't it? Because otherwise you would only have the perspective of Emily, which wouldn't really give us anything about what was happening and why it happened.
Exactly. And I mean, I think when I first had the idea, I just thought, I would just be in the school. The minute the bus, like all the kids basically would just be gone. and it would all be kind of like focused around the school. But then I don't know, it kind of took on like a weird life of its own, and
like they do.
like they do. And I don't know, I think, again, like I was saying before, like this stuff that happens in the news that sort of gets in my head, and so I've been reading about sort of things to do with, I don't know, like drug dealing and drugs in schools and things like this, and all of that, and that sort of suddenly became like an interesting storyline to me. And I thought, do you know what, actually it would be quite interesting if these kids aren't sort of just complete like little innocents.
Yeah.
And I really liked the sort of, what do you call it, the kind of the dramatic irony of the fact that all the parents are sort of standing around in school, sort of, you know, sort of rubbing their hands and going, oh, our poor little darlings. And then you cut into the next chapter and you see that they're not quite such little darlings. You know, they're actually sort of doing things, and they're teenagers, you know, so they do have their own lives. They have complicated they have complicated lives and stories of their own, and all sorts of things, some of which are in their control and some of which have sort of got out of their control. And so I quite like I liked the idea that it wasn't just a sort of a straightforward story of like, oh, someone's kid's gone missing, they've got to track them down. It was actually a case of sort of the parents going through a little bit of a learning a lesson of their own, which is that their kids are a bit more sophisticated than they realized, and have got more stuff going on than they realized, and that they don't live quite in this little protected bubble that they think that this, you know, elite school has given them, really. So I just started playing with all of that, and as soon as I started thinking of that, exactly as you say, I couldn't then just tell the story from the parents' point of view, because you just would have no capacity really to find out what the kids were up to. So then I thought, right, okay, I'll do it as a dual narrative. And I did. Almost as soon as I got started, I found it too hard to go from one chapter to the other. So I would write like a whole series of Emily's chapters, like one after the other, and then a whole series of Olivia's chapters, kind of one after the other, because otherwise I just kept slipping out of the voice. They sort of bled into each other.
I think I don't know. I mean, some people can obviously write like that, but I think in my head it feels a lot easier to be able to do that whole, you know, one sort of narrative and then another narrative, just because you don't get that sort of the bitty bit of like it stopping. Whereas, you know, I wanted to carry on, you know. I think it's always a sign of a good book when you get to like the end of the chapter and then you don't want that chapter to end, but then you go back to the other voice and you're like, oh no, so what's going to happen? Because you want that suspense of like, oh, that bit's going to stop now, and now we're going to go back to them.
And I always think it's nice if I read a book with sort of dual narrative or multiple narratives, it's always nice to think that you could almost open the page at random, and just by reading it you'd know which character chapter you were in, because they're distinctive, you know. I always find it slightly disappointing if I read a book and I feel like every narrative, it sort of feels the same or sounds a bit the same. So it was quite nice to sort of separate it a little bit, and I would sort of get into Olivia voice, and then I would sort of go over and I'd spend sort of a couple of weeks writing Emily voice, you know. And I felt like that just helped me a little bit to sort of navigate that. And then afterwards there was an awful lot of sort of, you know, once you start to stitch them all together, because I did want them to sort of overlap and dovetail and almost have a sense of like that the two women, there were points where the two women, as in the mother and the daughter, sort of almost say the same thing in completely different sort of contexts and different parts of the day, because they're very close. So I sort of wanted them to kind of echo each other. So obviously afterwards, because I'd written them separately, I then had to kind of go and write all of that stuff in. So pretty much like the beginning and ending of every chapter sort of then had to change so that it sort of dovetailed with the other, you know. So there was a lot of kind of stitching it all back together, and there's a lot of editing.
I've actually written that leads me nicely onto my next question, which was the past is like a really big part of the book, and it's really twisty, and I was interested in, you know, is that something that sort of the twists and the turns, is that something that you add as part of the editing process or as you go sort of thing, and then you sort of tweak it at the end?
I mean, I do tend to sort of plot and plan a little bit. I think I knew some of I knew, it's hard to talk about this without spoilers, but I knew like the sort of like the big foundation stones, as it were, of like Emily's backstory and kind of where she is and why she's there and what she's doing, and that there's quite a big backstory that you sort of need to find out about her. But then what's weird is that stuff also happens organically when you start to write, and there's a couple of things. There's a bad guy who pops up basically in the daughter's chapters. So this guy who she calls Jones, because we don't know his name, she just calls him Jones, and he was just sort of there to start with, as you know, because I just needed someone that had kind of taken these kids and then, but the daughter doesn't have sort of a father figure in her life, and so I quite liked the idea that he actually, you know, he isn't just like a straightforward hard man, and she sort of manages to sort of wrap him around her little finger, really. She's quite charming, and she sort of charms him, and he sort of, you know, softens a bit to her. And then his sort of part element, sort of, you know, backstory that dovetails with it a little bit, that just kind of happened organically. Like while I was writing, I suddenly thought, oh, it would make complete sense if, you know, ... and that kind of comes in. And then, like you say, then you have to sort of go back and do a little bit of retrofitting. But it all just kind of flowed in quite seamlessly, and I quite like it when that happens, because I don't love coincidences. I don't like a plot that sort of relies on a coincidence. So it's quite nice when suddenly you think, oh, okay, this thing that's already in the book has given me like a great reason for why this happens much later on, you know. And it's just sort of there, you know. It's like that's nice when that happens. It's a gift.
Well, I think we talked about Olivia and also, well, the children as the children, with young adults, I should say, and how, you know, I think we're all like that, aren't we? We all have a perception of what our children are like, which is completely different to what they see, the perception of themselves. But I liked Olivia. She's a real tough cookie, isn't she? She's a lot more streetwise than her mother thinks she is. And I liked her. Was she fun to write?
Yeah, she was brilliant, and I quite enjoyed writing. You know, they're like A-level students, so they're kind of 16, 17. And what was I mean, that's roughly the age of my kids, actually. So that was quite handy, sort of being around them and their friends. I'd be sort of like observing them, you know, and kind of notice like little, I don't know, just little things that they say, or little ways that they, you know, they address each other. But what I thought was really nice to write about her at her age is the idea that they really are just in this kind of no man's land between being a child and being an adult, you know. And there are times when they are incredibly sophisticated, and like you say, Olivia has got this whole sort of like little life that we discover. She's not, you know, she's a very smart girl. She's a very clever girl. She's very driven. She knows exactly what she wants, but she is nevertheless still quite naive about the world, because she's a 17-year-old girl. And there are people out there who will take advantage of that. So, you know, hopefully there's some sort of sympathy for her. I think a little empathy maybe in the reader, because she is just on the cusp of not quite being old enough to cope with what she's trying to do, basically.
I mean, it's a difficult book to talk. I mean, there's a lot of crime books are difficult to talk to without giving away. But I think, you know, that people watching will definitely get a flavour of the book. And another thing we talked about before we came on air was, I'd said that it's sort of, for me, it felt like a bit like a sort of one of those sort of dark academic books where, you know, set in a school, and it's not just about the kids going missing, and, you know, it's a lot more multi-layered than that, isn't it? There's a lot more going on. In a reasonably small paperback, you pack a lot into it.
Yeah, I do get a bit carried away sometimes. I tend to put I tend to throw everything in and the kitchen sink, and well, I think I suppose in a way it kind of goes back a little bit to like my previous novel that I was mentioning, Dead Mile, which is the one
Yeah,
that's set in a traffic jam on the motorway. And what kind of happened with that one was that, I was so there's obviously there's all these cars in the traffic jam, and there's a dead guy that's in one. As soon as the traffic stops, they realize that there's a dead guy behind the wheel of one car, and it's kind of an impossible mystery. It's like, well, how the traffic has literally just stopped, how can he be dead behind the
yeah,
wheel of this car? um and with that, what was brilliant fun was like literally in my mind, as every car door opened and somebody got out onto the motorway, like onto the scene of
yeah,
this book, I realized that they need to have a story. They need to be
yeah,
suspicious in some way, so that my main character in that book, who is actually a police officer, she starts investigating this, and just literally everybody is, could it be them? Could it be him? Could it be her? Could it be them working together? And
yeah,
all these kinds of question marks kind of have to kind of go like bing, 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 over everybody's head. So I had a lot of plates spinning in that book.
hmm,
Everybody in every car had to be another
yeah,
plate. So it was fiendishly complicated, actually. And then I wanted to bring that element of it through to this book. So again, I needed every one of those parents that's in the school to have something, to have
yeah,
that same question mark over their head. And then with the kids,
yeah,
so you do just sort of have all of these stories sort of swirling around. And then I suppose it's a case of sort of working, like, I don't know, it's like the pace of it. Like some of those stories, they sort of get resolved really quickly. So you
yeah,
sort of get some of them out of the way, but some of them sort of linger and they sort of go away and then come back again. And some of them
yeah,
turn out to be bigger than you realized. And you know what I mean? You're just trying to sort of find space for them all
yeah.
kind of
And
in
that
the
must be
book.
quite a challenge to sort of, when you've got multiple characters like you do, and you've got the parents and the children in two separate. Was that a challenge to sort of keep I guess like a track of what they're all doing, or was that again like something you had to do afterwards?
Yeah, well, some of it you end up kind of like, retrofitting. Sometimes I felt like I'm more like an air traffic controller than a writer. Do you know what I mean? It's like you just got all this
Yeah,
stuff up in the air and you got to just bring it all into land. Um, yeah, I mean, I suppose it's a case of sort of giving them all enough airtime.
yeah.
And
You want them to be sort of developed enough, don't you, that people are interested in them, and they've also got that they could be a suspect as well, or they could have
yeah,
something to do with it. Otherwise, they're just a bit like, I don't sort of see sometimes the reason for like just someone to be there, but I think it's although it's a lot of work, it's actually more entertaining for the reader if you've got multiple characters and multiple things going on.
yeah, that's it. And I suppose the challenge actually was to make them all, I mean, even sort of vaguely credible, so that they do have
Yeah,
problems that seem significant enough that they might have created this situation, which is quite extreme, um
yeah,
but not kind of so extreme that you think, well, that's you've suddenly gone into the plot
unbelievable.
of
Yeah,
like sort of 24 with Jack Bauer. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like it is a very sort of practical, down to earth kind of book.
yeah,
um so yeah, so I spend a lot of my time sort of sitting there looking at things and almost kind of weighing it up and kind of going, is this the right sort of weight for this book?
mm.
Is this too much like a plot out of Slow Horse? Have I been watching too much Slow Horses? I've got this kind of international espionage. Like, no, that's not right for my book. I have to let that
Yeah,
one go and bring in a different one. Yeah. So it's kind of a case of weighing it all up and seeing which pieces fit.
yeah. So how long does it take you generally to write one of your books with all that in mind?
Um, Guilt Trip. I was quite lucky, I suppose, with Guilt Trip, because I got my book deal and then I had sort of 18 months until Dead Mile was going to come out. And it was because I'd finished that book sort of before it went out on submission. There was fairly minimal editing for that book. So
Right.
I
Oh, that's
sort
good.
of had
Yeah.
this, yeah, so I had this sort of nice, luxurious sort of amount of time to write Guilt Trip. So it took, I don't know, sort of a year or so. I mean, I tend to I'm not a fast writer
No.
at all. Um, then I write a bit and then stop and replot and then write a bit more and all of this. But then my next book is going to have to, I'm going to have to turn that around in a year. So I'm having to kind of speed up a little bit and get a bit more focused.
Do you find that's like, I guess that's one of the cons of being a sort of a published author now, is the expectation, I guess, with that first book, and possibly even with the second one in your case, because you'd already written the first one, you had that luxury of time. But as you become more established and get more deadlines, I guess that luxury goes slightly.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, ultimately it's a nice problem to have, right? I would never complain about it, but yeah, it definitely comes with its challenges. I mean, and I suppose the other thing, like you say, time is an issue. Like, you do want to make sure that, in a perfect world, you do have a book coming out on the regular schedule. So you want to try and hit those deadlines. Plus, I'm a journalist at heart, so it kind of kills me if I don't hit my deadline. I do want to hit it. But the other sort of challenge is trying to sort of almost, is like, if you excuse my pun on the Dead Mile book, it's staying in my lane. I find that I have all these ideas that sort of ping into my head, and sometimes you have to go, okay, well, that might be a great idea, but that's not what you're writing. You don't write books like that. You can't write that book. I need to write another closed circle mystery. It needs to be in a relatable sort of environment. It needs to have a lot of characters. It probably, like, this is what I do now. At least what I do for the next kind of 4 books, because that's literally what I'm contracted to write. So, you have to keep your eye on the target a little bit, which perhaps makes it easier in a funny sort of way to come up with ideas. I mean, like I say, when I came up with the idea for Guilt Trip, it's because I was thinking, right, I need an idea, and I need it this morning.
Well, that's really, impressive, because normally when you're under the pressure of that's when you can't. It's like when you're in the shower or the bath or driving to work or whatever, that you get those ideas that come, and they're amazing. I have them in the middle of the night, and they seem like a really good idea in the middle of the night, and then the cold light of day, they're not really that good.
Yeah, well, that was my danger of putting it in this cover letter, and then once you're committed to it, you're like, oh, I'm going to write this now, and I actually haven't got any more of an idea than one single sentence. I mean, I say I had this idea like off the cuff, but I suppose, like anything, I'm sure every writer you have on probably says the same thing. Like, it probably came from some sort of like deep subconscious place. And I do think so. Years ago, in a bit of a sort of another previous life, so I lived abroad for a long time, and one of the jobs I did when I was living overseas, I worked for a security company for a while. And so we used to have a lot of people that did like really proper hardcore physical security. So we had a lot of guys that used to, like, we had sort of like a couple of people who used to be in the SAS, and a couple of people that were like Gurkhas, and people that were Hong Kong police, and they were doing like all the real proper physical security, even like stuff like kidnap and rescue and things like that, like really kind of hardcore stuff. And I was kind of sitting in like a little corner of the office, kind of writing up the advice that we got from them, and I would basically like write reports for companies who had a lot of business travelers. So I was kind of advising them on all kinds of security issues. And one of the things that we always used to say, quite a lot of the countries that people would be traveling to, so sort of like some parts of Nigeria, for example, or bits of Latin America, there is a really high risk of kidnap and vehicles being kidnapped. So you sort of basically, if you've got a vehicle going along and there's a couple of people in that vehicle who work for some big international organization, they would be targets for people sort of grabbing them and obviously like demanding a ransom and all the rest of it. So I would be writing sort of these reports of giving our standard advice. And one of the main things that we always said, that I wrote over and over and over again, was do not draw attention to yourself. Like, you don't draw attention to your wealth, basically. And by wealth, I mean like, your connection to like a big international company.
Almost like going in and going, oh, I'm like this person, I'm the CEO of blah 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 blah, and so you basically want to be like, I'm the cleaner of,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, ideally, don't drive along a road with, I don't know, if you work for like Shell or something, like just don't have Shell emblazoned on the side of your car. Just keep it a bit more low key. So anyway, I think this is the idea that kind of was sort of somewhere
Yeah,
in the
I
back of
can
my
see
mind
that.
when I saw those buses, even though it was like a moment of almost like sort of cognitive dissonance, because we don't have those kidnapping problems, touch wood, in this country. But I think there was a little moment that morning where just like a little part of my brain from like 20 years ago when I used to write these reports almost like popped up. And I just thought, why are these school buses all driving around like emblazoned with the names of these sort of, quite sort of basically all the private schools sort of around? There's quite a few around, that just this one roundabout where I was like, they all kind of come right past. And I just thought, why are they all emblazoned? Like they're so drawing attention to themselves. And even though it was sort of inappropriate, because it comes from like this previous job and writing about places that are completely different to here, I think that was probably like the seed of the idea.
Well, people always
So
say, don't they, write what you know, and in a way, although that it's something that you did know and you were very much, and I think I definitely think that there's probably in every book there's got to be a part of you in it, because you're writing it, and even though it's fictional, there's still it's still coming from your thoughts and your head, and so there's got to be something of you in it, isn't it? There's got to be part of you, unless you're very, very, I guess if you'd written like, I don't know, 100 books, you might have got to the point. But even then, I still think you can't remove yourself from your voice, isn't it? It's all your voice as an author.
Yeah, I mean, you're the filter that goes through, aren't you? I feel like even if you're writing something that's incredibly remote from you, as in, the details of your life, it's still, I don't know, it's still got your kind of emotional life in it. Even if the person in your book is completely unrecognizable from you in all different ways, I still think you've got the same emotional life.
And I think that's what they say about, like, there's only sort of, was it 7 stories or something? But that, but that's the thing, isn't it? Is that if you and I were both given the same sort of, you write the book about this, we both write completely different books.
Oh, totally. And I feel like I feel this all the time. Like every book I start writing, there's always a moment just at the point where I'm kind of committed to writing that book, where I seem to see something pop up on the internet of someone else has now got that exactly the same storyline coming out. There was a book with a school bus. There was a book by a writer called Jackie Kabler that came out sort of 18 months or so before this one, which was about a school bus. I mean, it's a very different setup, but I just saw the headline of it, like this book about a school bus disappears, and I was just like, oh my God, I haven't even written it. I haven't even written it, and it's already like, out of date. So yeah, these things, there's always a book that sort of somehow resembles the thing you're writing, but exactly as you say, I don't think it matters, because everyone's just going to write their own completely unique book.
Absolutely. And sometimes I review books as well, and so sometimes I'll read 2 or 3 books that are not similar, but they've got a similar storyline, but but it is different, and it might be set in the same place, it might be similar characters, but the books are also very different. I just think there's just so much, isn't there, that can change and would change because 2 different people are writing it.
Yeah, and I think we're all sort of working somehow under the same kind of social cultural forces, and these things seem to just have a bizarre effect on people. And all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, there were just so many books that came out that were about aeroplanes somehow. And I'm sure that some sort of, social psychologist would probably kind of go, oh, well, it must be a reaction to COVID, where we want to
travel or something.
Traveling, so now everyone's writing about. But I don't know if it's as straightforward as that. But it does seem to be that there are these little fads, and you suddenly get like a little glut of books in this area. And I don't know. I mean,
I wonder if it's publishing as well. Is that they want, and I guess different publishers, obviously they see what's selling and what works, and so they know what will sell and what won't sell. And I know I've spoken to people about books that they've written, and then they've had to change them quite a lot because they don't really fit into any sort of genre that the publishers want them to. So I think there's probably that as well, isn't it? That commercial side of it, of we want your book to sell, so it will fit
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think depending on the publisher, I think some of them really literally do sort of say, well, books about aeroplanes, for example, seem to be doing really well now. And, especially maybe some of the digital imprints where you can sort of, you can kind of react quite quickly and have a book out in a relatively short amount of time. I think they do react to trends and ride
definitely,
the coat waves, the coattails, and that's absolutely fine. And like you say, other books that don't quite sit a little that comfortably in a genre, they can be quite difficult to market, really.
Did you so a big part of the story is Emily's sort of backstory, and we can't really talk about it too much, but how did that sort of come about? How did you sort of, it's very difficult, I know, I'm just like saying, can we talk about it, but can we not talk about it?
Yeah, how did it come about? I suppose I don't know. I find that characters are very sort of mysterious, and they either tend to be a character that I have to really sort of reverse engineer in the sense that I'll probably have some sort of idea of them doing something quite often, like right at the end of the book, and I kind of think to myself, well, why on earth would they have got themselves into this kind of situation? And you sort of kind of go back and you think, like, okay, well, maybe if this happened to them and if this happened to them. And then the other type of characters that I find I write are almost the exact opposite. And they're those ones where you just suddenly feel like you know them, like you know everything about them. And I mean, the main character in Deadmile was very much like that. She's called Sergeant Belinda Billy Kidd. And she's one of those people where the moment I started writing it, it was like I knew her. It was like I'd known her for such a long time. I didn't have to kind of like design anything with her. I just sort of knew exactly what she was going to do and say. And she had this really sort of vivid kind of sense of humor, which kind of took me by surprise a little bit, because I wasn't planning to write like a sort of a funny crime novel, but there are sort of like the odd, just little lines of humor in it. And then that was quite tricky, because then when I started, a bit like we were saying earlier, where once you've done something once, you sort of almost have to kind of like replicate it. So then when I came to write Guilt Trip, which is completely separate standalone novel, I thought, oh well, I need to have a few sort of funny lines in it again, that sort of deadpan humor, because people who've read Deadmile will maybe expect to have that again. So I sort of then had to kind of find a place for that. But yeah, in terms of her backstory, I think I just wanted her to be quite a surprising character. I wanted her to be, I mean, I think you can feel it, right? It's probably not much of a spoiler to say that she is not all that she seems right at the beginning. She is an outsider. She is a bit mysterious. And you discover why halfway through. You discover why, and that was and it was also a bit of a structural decision. I mean, to sort of to do a bit of boring kind of writer talk. I quite like to write towards a surprising midpoint. I kind of quite like to almost like divide the book in half and think, right, I'm going to write towards this really surprising thing that's going to happen in the middle, and then you sort of write down from it the other side of the mountain, as it were. And I knew that surprising midpoint was going to be basically revealing who she is. I've said too much.
No. I think that's really good. I think that was very good.
You can feel it. I think you can feel that that's coming. So it's not a big spoiler.
No, and I think I like that, and I think I definitely could see it being like. Have you sort of thought about if it was like turned into TV? Because I could definitely see it being. And actually, I haven't read Deadmile, but actually I could sort of, from what you said, I could, when you were talking about it, I could definitely picture it in my head really quickly. So I sort of thought, so is that something that you would like, or something?
Oh gosh, I mean, obviously it's the dream. It's the dream. There have been discussions about Deadmile, but nothing is sort of concrete yet. I very much sort of. I think one of the reasons why I wrote that book was right back when I had just the very original idea for it, and I hadn't really started writing it. And I was chatting to somebody about it, and someone said, "Oh, that sounds like it would be really cheap to film," which obviously
is right away.
a good thing. Yeah, exactly, because you just got a really simple set. You just mock up a motorway, and you know, so then you save, you know, I think streamers like something that's cheap to film, because then they can spend some money on the talent, you know, to be in it.
Yeah, definitely.
So I remember thinking to myself, oh, okay, maybe this is a good idea. Maybe this is the one I should write, you know. And then I structured it. I very much structured it actually with a TV sort of not so much an adaptation in mind, but I watch a lot of box sets. I watch a lot of those kind of crime, you know, six-parters. And I thought to myself, okay, they're so compelling. They just keep you coming back. I'm going to try and sort of use that similar structure for a novel. So Dead Mile it literally starts, it's like hour 1, second hour, third hour, fourth hour. So that in my mind, that's like episode 1, episode 2. I don't think they would necessarily translate onto the television in the same way like that, because they're different. But I felt like that was sort of kind of what I was trying to do, because then each of those hours obviously has to build up to a climax.
Yeah.
And hopefully that helps the pace sort of go across the book. And that didn't quite work in the same way for Guilt Trip. I didn't feel the need to kind of break it up like that. I think partly because it's got 2 narrative strands, as we've been saying. I think it would just get too bitty. It would have been it felt too fragmented. So it didn't quite do the same thing. But it actually spans about the same amount of time. It's only a few hours again. I quite like writing these really almost like real time.
Well, it makes the pace really quick, doesn't it? Because, you know, you've got, you know, it's not like spread over, like, you know, so you've got to cram a lot into that. You know, there's got to be a lot going on in a book that's 300 pages, 400 pages. You've got to cram that in. So
exactly. It's only like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
I think I'm just a very impatient person. I can't be bothered with anything.
Well, no, and I'm the same. I like fast paced, and I think it definitely does translate to TV better if it's fast paced, because that's the thing, isn't it? You know, like if you're binging a box set, you want it to be like, you know, the next episode. You know, you get to the we do it in our house, and we go, we're going to watch another one. I remember when we watched Line of Duty, and like literally we watched like 3 series in about 2 weeks because we were just like hooked. So that's what you want, isn't it? It's like, and I like that in a book as well. I want to find out what's happening quickly. I don't want to be slow.
No, exactly. And I like the idea. I mean, again, I think it started again with Dead Mile, and I think because my main character in Dead Mile is so sort of, you know, she's very much a middle-aged woman. She's sort of, I don't think I say how old she is, but in my mind she's like same as me. She's like early 50s, and I think it's that is the time of your life when you're being pulled in every direction all of the time. Like you just constantly got people kind of asking you for, you know, the kids are asking you for things, the other members of the family are asking you for things, work is asking you for things. Like you just always got people kind of pulling you. And so I wanted to sort of recreate that. So when she's on the motorway, because she's the only police officer there, she's just constantly got like, this person is asking her to do something, so she has to run off there. And then while she's halfway through doing that thing, she gets called over there to do that thing, and then something else happens, and she's just got that kind of like, oh my God, will it ever stop sort of sense that to be honest, I think a lot of people in middle age just feel all the time, because they're just so busy all the time.
I feel that. I'm the same age, so I definitely. I mean, my kids are grown up, so I mean, I'm lucky with that. But yes, life is still. I don't know if you think, oh well, when your kids leave home, it's going to get quieter. It really doesn't.
I'm sure it doesn't. I'm not quite there yet, but I think I've already worked out that like, no, they're still going to be on the WhatsApp all the time.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't really change that much. But as you say, other things change, and you know.
Yeah, and I liked that. I liked that sense of chaos, just that sort of chaos, that sense of sort of slightly chaotic. I mean, I hate to say chaotic female lives, because I'm sure men feel it as well, but somehow it does seem particularly this period of life for a lot of people does seem particularly chaotic, and I think it just appealed to me to kind of like embed that into the book. And I think that happens more naturally if the time frame is just compressed and speeded up. And I just, I don't know, I quite like it. And like I say, I'm just a very impatient person. I'm kind of like, come on, I just want to get this over and done with.
I'm just looking at the time, and we're coming up to the end of the hour, which it's gone really quickly.
Really quick.
Who have been your influences, Jo, for your writing?
Oof, gosh, so many. I don't know. I think I liked sort of crime, like even going back to sort of childhood, I read a lot of Nancy Drew.
Yeah.
All of that kind of thing. I read a lot of like Ian Rankin books. I read a lot of Ian Banks. There was a period of my life where I only really seemed to read books by people called Ian. I remember because I lived abroad, I packed up all my books for a few years, and I came back a few years later and unpacked them all. And so it was like a whole load of Ian Rankin, a whole load of Ian Banks, a whole load of Ian McEwan, and I was just like, wait, what? This is really strange. And then more recently, I mean, I don't know. I like a lot of the big sort of psychological thriller writers, Gillian Flynn, and all of that. And then just recently, I've been reading quite a lot of horror, strangely enough.
Oh, really? I used to read a lot of horror. And then when I got pregnant, I couldn't read horror. I had dreams, but I like horror. I've gone back to reading horror again. So
you see, I never did. I was never into horror. I think I was too afraid to read horror when I was younger.
Dean Koontz and James Herbert, Stephen King. They were like I read Jackie Collins and Stephen King and James Herbert. That was like my teenage. That was my 16 and 17 year olds. I was probably about 14 when I read The Rats by James Herbert, and that was a big mistake because I hate rats now. And
you see, I never read any of those. And then just recently, I don't know. I think horror is having a bit of a moment. There's a lot of really interesting, sort of quite feminist, I think, takes on horror novels. I mean, I've just got this one that's just on the table next to me, which is called "Teenage Girls Can Be Demons."
I haven't seen that one.
It's a proof that I was sent. It's short stories. I've just started reading it. It's really funny. It's very subversive and satirical, I think, a lot of horror. I think I hadn't actually appreciated that about horror.
No, I think probably it was one of those genres that was a bit overlooked.
Totally.
It was a bit sort of, in the sort of I used to work in a library and I remember it being sort of not being very big, the sort of horror section, but then like Stephen King became massive, and he writes maybe 2 a year now or something with other people as well. So I think he's obviously, but I remember, and I think there's quite a lot of sort of almost like fantasy horror for like young adults. I think that's definitely sort of becoming more popular. So
and I think it seems to be, a great space to sort of, I don't know, explore some stuff to do with identities and, just to be a bit sort of socially transgressive and things like that. So I feel like I'm having a renaissance. I missed the teenage reading that I should have done and never did. I'm now catching up.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So what's next for you, Jo?
So I'm writing, I will have a book that comes out next summer as well, and I'm working on that, and that is, I need another kind of like closed circle sort of contained space. So that is set in a crime festival. I have two main characters again, a male writer and a female writer. She writes kind of quite sexy, sassy crime, and he writes ultra-violent Nordic noir. And the two of them sort of meet at the beginning of this festival, fall in love, plan to kill this celebrity author that they're really annoyed with. And then when that celebrity author actually turns up dead, they then have to actually solve the murder in order to exonerate themselves.
Oh wow! Oh, I love a book set at a literary festival. That's great.
There's been quite a few. Again, it's the same thing of, like I was saying before, like suddenly you get you think you're writing something a bit original, and then all of a sudden you turn around and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many books about writers or writer festivals or writers and agents.
Like you say, there's only 7 stories, isn't there? So you're gonna just and yours will be different to everybody else's. So is that one done, or is that?
It's done. I have a first draft. I've been tinkering around with something else sort of over the summer to have a break from it. So then I need to, in fact, later this month, next month, where are we? We're right at the end of this month.
Yeah.
In September, I need to then really sort of lock it down and sort that out and kind of go back and see what I've got and kind of pull it into shape. But that's been really good fun to write, because it's 2, again, completely different voices, like trying to get the voice of this very sort of funny, sassy, sort of sexy crime writer, but then also like the incredibly cold, austere voice of this Nordic crime writer. It's just been like, it's just been really fun to play with. So I
look forward to reading that one.
I'll see how that's turned out when I look back at it after a bit of a break.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds brilliant. And have you got any events sort of lined up coming up that for this one?
Yeah, I have. I've got a few things. So I live in Brighton. So on the 9th, I think the 9th of September, I'm doing an event in a bookshop in Brighton called Kemp Town Bookshop, which is a lovely, lovely bookshop run by a lovely friend of mine called Kathy. So I'm doing that's my sort of main event here. I'm going to be in Manchester actually later in September for Crime Central. With Rob Parker and Sam Holland and Michael Wood and some other names that you guys will know on UKCBC. And I think, they're the 2 main things I've got lined up this month.
Excellent. So brilliant. So you're busy then before you have to sort of hunker down and
exactly,
finish.
Yeah, I do seriously need to get my head down on this other book. So that will be the rest of my year.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing The Guilt Trip with us. And if you haven't read it, it's a really pacey, exciting read. So definitely one. If you haven't had your holiday yet, it would make a perfect holiday read. And actually, with the kids going back to school, it makes it even more appropriate.
Yes, the right time of year, isn't it? I'm just
definitely. Thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Jo. Good luck with book 2 and book 3. So please come back and chat to us next year about your literary festival murders. We're looking forward to that one.
We'll see how that goes. Thank you so much, Karen. It's lovely to talk to you.
Thank you. Bye everybody.
Bye.